Now, in talking about the Enlightenment, how are we going to characterize the Enlightenment in general and accordingly understand Locke as representative of the Enlightenment and in many regards the beginning of the philosophical Enlightenment, sometimes dated from 1691, which was the date of publication of his essay concerning human understanding. Sometimes that's taken to mark the beginning of the philosophical Enlightenment. Well, the term Enlightenment, of course, refers to the light of reason, which in that context means the light of scientific knowledge, the light of knowledge gained by those objective scientific methods, whether inductive or deductive, at least with the kind of objectivity that science claimed, and the kind of conclusiveness which science then claimed. You remember the lines of Tennyson, God said let Newton be and all was light? You say, why pick Newton if it's not the light of science? Now, the Enlightenment then, with its emphasis on reason, was skeptical of tradition, skeptical of authority, frequently gave no place to revelation. Insofar as there were Christians participating in the Enlightenment, and therefore talking about revelation, it's more of an add-on, something in addition to what we know by reason alone, rather an add-on than an underlying perspective that helps us understand the rest. This was an age very much opposed to dogmatic systems, which is why the big system builders, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, are really 17th century rather than 18th century Enlightenment people. Because those system builders claim a kind of systematic knowledge which could not be established by scientific means alone. Remember the problems that you seem to find even, no, I don't mean you even, but you seem to find even in Descartes, where his proofs didn't seem to be all that they were supposed to be. It's an age of criticism, criticizing the very possibility of such knowledge. And so it's not surprising that the Enlightenment mind turned inward on itself. And Enlightenment thinkers started criticizing the claims of the Enlightenment and of scientific knowledge. So that when we get to David Hume, we'll find that he is really a philosophical skeptic. He's skeptical about that kind of Enlightenment knowledge, objective, with certainty. You see, he's skeptical about the very possibility of that, and develops in its place an account of how belief arises and seems to be justified, as distinct from that dogmatic kind of knowledge. David Hume was not alone in that. Figures like Voltaire or a group in France known as the philosophers, or as the French word which still means the philosophers, but I guess to distinguish it from other philosophers, they're usually spoken of in English by the French term, les philosophes, a group of philosophical skeptics about the possibility of knowledge. Now, it's not only the age of the light of reason, it's also the age of the rule of reason. That is to say, the rule of reason not only in our thinking, but in our living. The role of reason in our living. And so the idea is that when we're ruled by reason, we are freed from other causal conditions. If we act, that is to say, out of impulse, emotional impulse, we're not free. We're driven, like Avis, driven, you see. But you missed that one. You know the Avis ad, don't you? We're driven. Has Avis stopped advertising that way? Oh, sorry, I'll have to change. All right, if you act out of emotional compulsion, you're not acting freely, you're driven. It's only when you are able to detach yourself by standing back and thinking about what you do, detach yourself from the emotional compulsion, that you're really free, you see. So freedom is possible under the rule of reason. As we say in political matters, it's possible, political freedom is possible under the rule of laws, you see, but not where there are no laws. We must be detached from the compulsives in order to be free. And consequently, you find ethical theories developing which are concerned with knowing what is right. In the medievals, the concern was the good. That is to say, the ideal towards which we strive in seeking the highest good, God. But in the Enlightenment, the emphasis on ethics is more on principles and rules that enable us to know what is the right thing to do in this and every other case. After the same kind of detached objectivity and certainty in ethics as was claimed in science. And it was the age, therefore, in which theories of individual rights developed. John Locke, with his emphasis on the rights to life, liberty, and property, and other theories of rights that are the foundation of the French political heritage. Of course, the American political heritage. Our political system is essentially a product of the Enlightenment, very much so. The rule of laws governed by constitution represents the rule of reason, you see. So this is the characteristic, and in the reaction against that rule, skepticism about the light of reason, now the rejection of the rule of reason, that developed in Romanticism in the early 19th century, where Romanticism reverts to the freedom of the of the emotion, the creative genius who idealizes what freedom is like. So that some commentators have pointed out that what you get beginning in the Renaissance with the emphasis on political liberties, what you get gradually is an increased absolutization and idealization of the notion of individual freedom, you see. Individual rights in the Enlightenment, creative self-expression with the Romanticist, until you get that absolute freedom of some of the existentialists like Sartre, who absolutizes freedom, you see. In fact, it seems to me that there's something running through the American ethos which regards freedom as the highest of all values. Seems to me that's a very pagan idea. From Judeo-Christian standpoint, it's justice, not freedom, which is the highest of all social values. And freedom is just a subset of that, you see. But the emphasis so often, and it's good politics, is to talk about freedom rather than justice. Well, the Age of Enlightenment then in those ways. Now, John Locke, I'm suggesting, fits very much into this spirit of the Enlightenment. At the same time, there are other influences, of course, in his thinking. He's in the spirit of the Enlightenment, very much part of that scientific age, personal friend of Isaac Newton, picks up on the Newtonian model of particles of matter and applies it to his theory of ideas, as we'll see, and to his social philosophy. The physical universe, you have indivisible particles of matter, atoms, combined and moved according to fixed laws, equals simple ideas, combined according to fixed laws of association. In his social philosophy, he has social atoms, individuals, joined together according to laws of a social contract. Yeah. He has the same atomistic model as Newton had in his physics, he had as in his psychology, his epistemology, his social philosophy. Very much the same. Yet, at the same time, he has a Puritan heritage. His father was one of the signatories of the Westminster Confession of Faith, the classic Presbyterian document of the Counter-Reformation, 17th century. And something of that comes through, so that if you look, for instance, just at the opening paragraphs of our Locke selections, how many of you have the book with you? Well, don't make that mistake next time. Okay, the Kaufman Anthology. If you look at the outset of that,